and welcome to this masterclass. It's so much more. And to kick us off first tonight, we have a really special treat. We have Minnie, and she has an incredible experience to share with all of us that she's experienced over the last a little over a month since she really started on Solle. So it hasn't been that long. And so this is a really powerful testimonial about how powerful our products really are. So I'll go ahead and let you start, Minnie.
Well, I started with a few things that I felt that I needed to take vitamins and different things because I was going through these menopausal changes and started taking these vitamins for menopause and wanted to do something natural at the same time. I had to stay away from soy and all these other things that I was trying to make sure to do right. And because I felt I was so fatigued through the feeling that I was changing and the changes I was going through. And I felt like maybe I had a good routine going, but interesting enough, it wasn't enough. I figured that even though it would help me for a little bit, it didn't help. It didn't continue. It was something that I was a little concerned about. But a friend invited me to do the program, and that really helped to change what I was experiencing myself. Well, one of the things that I wasn't really sure about was whether or not this program would help. I had a lot of anxiety. I was very unsure if what I was taking was already helping me, if I changed it, if that was going to affect me, in any kind of way. And with the program, she didn't tell me much. She just said that it was going to be really good and it was going to help me because she herself was learning to use the program, but this was something new. And as she presented it to me, she said, it's going to make you feel well in many areas that you will find out as you go along. And I'm like, that's interesting. How is that possible? But sure enough, from the first time I had my first drink in this program till today, that's been already 4 weeks, I have felt exactly the same way from every drink I've had. And it hasn't been something like, okay, the first week it worked and the second week it just got weaker and my body got used to it the third week. It's been exactly the same. As a matter of fact, I look forward to having my next drink. And it's been 4 weeks and where my body has responded so well. And I've really enjoyed the fact that I had anxiety and I struggle with staying happy. That was my thing. Why was it that my health was not there at 100%? I had menopause brain. I didn't have that clarity that I wanted to. I'm an interpreter, so I have to always find words and make sure I have words ready to go. And from day one, I called and I said, can this be possible? Can I have this clarity so quickly? It's my second drink of the day. And I feel like all these words are coming out of my mouth. And it was very exciting to see that this was working so quickly. But honestly, I was like, is this going to last? But it's been up every week, has shown me every single week that I have felt the same way. It's really helping me. I don't feel this fatigue. Although I have experienced emotions that have come and go, it's been very positive and consistent, but it's been very new and my body feels good. I feel really good. I have the energy to work out. I work out more than 30 minutes a day, almost every day. And I look forward to the next day. And I'm able to sleep much better than I used to. So that has been like the biggest progress for me. And to know that as I was reading the different ingredients that the product had, the different drinks I'm having and the different products that I was taking through the program, I realized that exactly what it said there, I can look forward to that. Like if I had a certain drink and it said it would help my mood, it really helped my mood. I was looking forward to feeling better. And another thing that I really noticed that has been very changing for me is that my body became a little scheduled. It was looking forward to my next drink. And that was very energetic for me, very positive for me. It has made me stay happy and look forward to the program longer than what I was expecting. Now I'm ready for the next month. But another thing I need to share with you, Erica, is that along the way, the person that has guided me along told me from the very beginning, you're not going to do this alone. And that's how it's felt. I felt like she's been there for me. And at moments where I felt like, I don't know if I should bother you again, she's always told me it's not a bother. I'm going to be here. And I haven't felt alone. And that feels really good, because you can have a wonderful program and a wonderful product, but sometimes you get discouraged and you don't know which direction to go. And sometimes you might not even know why some certain things are happening. And every time I would ask her, this is happening, she would say, can it be this? Can it be that? And that would help me along to figure out what it was. So it feels good. It feels good that it's just not something that you promise for it to be really well. But when you see it every single day, it's not even a weekly thing. It's every single day. You look forward to it because it really makes you feel good. And this is one thing I've really learned about this program. And I look forward to many others, that this is something that works from the inside out. You have to try it to really know what really it's going to produce, how it's going to work out for you as a person. And I'm increased my water. I'm not drinking coffee anymore. I'm not depending on that anymore. So I'm excited about the changes I've made. And I've lost about 7 pounds so far. And I'm excited to find out what else is next.
Thank you so much for sharing, Minnie. I appreciate everything you've shared. And I agree with you. I 100% believe that all of our formulas, all of our programs are ones that you have to just try them to really understand the power in them. Because I mean, we like say on the box, like, oh, it does this, this, and this, or, you know, things like that. But it's just like, we can only share like the little piece of, you know, like the tip of the iceberg, right? Because really and truly, every single formula and every single program is so powerful, and it does so much more. And just like you said, you're going to get so many more benefits than you even thought you were going to get from the beginning. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. And I cannot wait to continue to watch as, you know, and see what all happens as you continue on your program.
Thank you.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about a very important topic, right? It's brain inflammation. And tonight, we are talking about brain inflammation, and specifically, we're actually going to talk about microglia activation and the blood-brain barrier. And I know that's kind of a big word, and these are terms that they might be new to you, right? But they're critical in the understanding of the brain and immunity in our body and our brain, and then our gut health and our connection between all of these. In fact, microglia activation and brain inflammation and leaky brain are some of the most misunderstood concepts within Western medicine. And they're also extremely common challenges in our modern world. So we are building on all of our previous master classes, right? It's all about this mind, body, wellness series. And we're talking about this 4-pillar roadmap to improve your health, right? Where we start with balance and then lift and clarify and calm. And so, of course, we started just to, you know, go through it real quick. We covered the roadmap with the first pillar, which is balancing of cellular fuel delivery. And we talked about circulation and oxygen, and then, of course, blood sugar balance. And if you missed any of those classes, just reach out to your mentor or the person who invited you to this class tonight, and they can lead you to the replays for this entire series. Then next, we moved into pillar number 2, which is to lift metabolic and immune function. And we started with the bridge of digestion, right? And then we talked about immunity in the gut and specifically, what the systemic effects of that is. And then we dove deeper into immune function, and we talked about how our immune system works in balance and what can happen when it's out of balance, right? And then, of course, our third pillar, we just wrapped up last week, and that was to clarify toxic buildup and stabilize endocrine function. And we had talked about detoxification and how our body detoxes in a very specific sequence, and how we need to improve elimination in order to make sure we are looking at detox in a safe way and in proper flow. And then last week, we talked about hormones and the most common causes of hormone challenges. Now, tonight, we are moving into our fourth pillar, which is to calm daily stress and restore nutritional energy. Now, remember, this is the framework, right? This is to help you build upon your foundation of health so that you can achieve optimal wellness in both the mind and the body, for you and those that you love. And we're looking at, we like to support all 4 pillars of the roadmap all the time. So balance, lift, clarify, and calm. We're nutritionally supporting them, and also through our specific behaviors, supporting all 4 pillars of the roadmap all the time. And then as we're going along the program, in the necessary order to address specific challenges, we may add in other things or change things up along the way. So starting tonight, calm daily stress and restore nutritional energy. The first thing we're going to dive into here is the brain, right? And specifically, I want to talk about this concept called microglia activation. Now, the microglia, as the name implies, micro means small, and glia in Latin means glue. So in the past, scientists used to think that these microglia cells were just glue that held the brain cells together, right? And these are found only in the brain. And what we have discovered over time is that for every 1 neuron, there's 10 microglia. So what that means is for every 1 brain cell, you have 10 microglia cells. So your brain is actually made up of more microglia cells than it is of actual brain cells or neurons. Now, these microglia cells make up about 50% of your overall brain volume. So almost half your brain are these microglia cells, and that's how important they are. Now, for years and years and years, scientists and doctors in the medical community, they thought that the only function of these cells was just scaffolding, right? Like glue, or like they held things together, like structurally. But more recent research, like only in the last couple of decades, we have discovered that the microglia cells are actually the immune cells of the brain. Right? So just like we have immune cells in our body, these are the immune cells in our brain, but they're very, very specialized immune cells. They're more than just immune cells. They actually help with the growth of neurons. They help to send messages, and they also help with pruning of the old and dead neurons, because the brain, its sole mission is that it's so busy, it cannot have any brain cells that are not working great, right? So if there's a brain cell in your brain that's not working great, the microglia's job is to basically like go up to it and be like, hey, you're not working, you're not going to cut it, we're sorry, you got to go ahead and take a hike, right? And it goes ahead and it gets rid of that cell. And so it gets rid of all the old and the dead and the injured neurons, so that every single brain cell that you have in your brain working is actually good ones, right? Now, this is really, really actually an important function, because what happens is it also gets rid of the protein aggregates. And these are like proteins that get caught up in your brain that lead to things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, other kinds of neuroinflammatory diseases, right? So this is actually a very, very protective process. But what happens is sometimes these microglia cells become activated and they kind of stay activated, and they trigger and they've been triggered by brain inflammation, right? And this is where you see in this picture, right? Like this is what it's supposed to look like. This would be very healthy microglia that's very balanced, and it's regulating neuronal activity and your brain plasticity, and your brain is working in balance, right? But as you get activated all the time and it really starts to deteriorate, you see it just kind of goes to like a little bit kind of mushy, right? And they're just not working as good. And this is what it looks like when you start to develop brain illness, brain injury, disease, like inflammation and all that kind of stuff. So this is just a really kind of a basic idea of what of what it looks like. So let's talk about when this gets when there's dysfunction, right? What are causes of this microglia dysfunction, right? How can these get activated and stay activated all the time, even though they're not supposed to be? So what are some things? So these microglia, basically they clean up the dead cells in the wake of toxicity. So this could be toxic chemicals that we're exposed to from our environment. This can be heavy metals. And I'll tell you, the heavy metals, especially mercury, are some of the most toxic substances known to your brain. And they trigger a huge, gigantic immune response, right? So another one is the head trauma, specifically like a concussion. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, most all of the research that we have about the microglia, when we discovered how important they were, actually came from scientists studying concussions and head trauma. And so another thing is, of course, lack of oxygen. And some of us know that, and as we've talked about in previous classes, that when you have a lack of oxygen to the brain, your brain cells do not function properly, and they even begin to die off, right? And so what will happen is the microglia will be activated because they're dying off, and it will cause that inflammation as well. Insulin surges, just like we had talked about in our previous class on blood sugar mastery. When your insulin surges goes up, what happens? We have this thing called glycation, which was, remember, like the onion frying in a pan. Well, it happens here too. So this glycation damage is the damage that's caused by blood sugar on your cells. Well, it can happen in your brain, and it's literally frying your brain and causing that glycation damage. If you were a child in the 90s, you might remember this commercial that was like a frying pan, and they cracked an egg in it, and it was like, this is your brain. And then, they would fry the egg and it would be like, this is your brain on drugs. Well, just like drugs, if you have high blood sugar and insulin surges, this is kind of your brain on blood sugar and insulin surges as well, right? Some other things, food sensitivity and gut inflammation, like we talked about in previous classes. Of course, gut infections, whether it's bacterial or virus or candida or even parasites, they can all stimulate that immunity in the gut and then trigger up through the blood-brain barrier as the blood, goes systemically, right? And can actually trigger in and cause inflammation in the brain as well. And then, of course, we have medications, right? So that's a very common trigger, like antibiotics, ibuprofen, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. All of these things can cause our brain tissues to get activated and activate the microglia and actually trigger this inflammation in the brain. Now, I'm often asked, if we have this microglia activation, does that mean that a person has leaky gut? Well, actually, the answer is that you can actually have your lymphoid tissue in both your gut and your brain activated through food and infection without having a severe leaky gut or having even leaky gut at all, right? So sometimes their symptoms look very, very similar, but they're actually not necessarily one and the same thing, right? So here's the thing about this microglia activation, because I get this all the time. People will tell me, well, how come my doctor doesn't tell me about this? Well, the reason is because currently, as of the date of recording this masterclass, there's no drug for microglia activation or to suppress the microglia activation, right? And because there's no drug for it and there's no surgery for it, it's not something that your medical doctor really will talk to you about. But it is causing brain inflammation, or at least responding to brain inflammation, and it does trigger brain dysfunction and imbalance in the brain and body. And we know it's directly associated with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other neuroinflammatory diseases. So real quick, let's talk about that blood-brain barrier. I mentioned it a second ago. And the blood-brain barrier is basically a network of capillaries and special neurons that basically create a barrier between your brain and all of the rest of your body. And just like in leaky gut, the blood-brain barrier keeps stuff out of the brain, right? So like in leaky gut, with the gut lining and the cells that line the entire gut, like we talked about before, that's designed to keep stuff inside the gut, right? And if you have leaky gut, things leak out of the gut. Well, when we talk about leaky brain, it means that the things can leak into the brain, like from the blood into the brain through that blood-brain barrier. Now, we call it leaky brain in layman's terms, like if you search on Google or something like that, you'll hear it called leaky brain. But the scientific term is actually called blood-brain barrier breach. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, let's talk about some symptoms of the microglia activation dysfunction, right? So I'll tell you the number one symptom is fatigue. Now, a lot of times people will think that fatigue is like a hormone problem. Maybe it's connected to the thyroid or adrenal, right? Like we hear adrenal fatigue all the time. But the reality is that fatigue is a brain symptom, right? And it's always a brain symptom. Fatigue happens in the brain, right? So now it's possible that your hormones are not activating all the things in the, that have to do with the brain. So they're contributing. But if you have true chronic fatigue, that's a brain symptom, right? Another thing is brain fog. Now, brain fog is a hallmark symptom of microglia activation because microglia activation equals brain inflammation. It's the same thing, right? So brain inflammation is caused by the microglia activation, and the microglia activation causes the brain inflammation, right? Like, so they go together. And so brain fog is a huge, huge, huge symptom of that. Poor concentration, lack of focus, and decreased mental speed. So this is where you can't process as fast. Things like decreased mental endurance, right? You don't last as long. Maybe like you're reading a book and you kind of get fatigued and tired, through it. Or one of the most popular ones that comes to me is that maybe you fall asleep when you're watching TV, like you started a program and you wanted to watch it and you're watching it, and then all of a sudden you drift off to sleep, right? That's mental endurance, right? I've also had people come to me that fall asleep when they drive, right? Or if you're a student and you take a test and it exhausts you, it tires you out, right? And you crash afterwards. These are all types of things that are directly connected with that brain inflammation, right? We also have like loss of words, like you just can't remember what the word that you wanted to say was. Like you have the thought, but the words are not there to fill that thought, right? Memory loss. Depression and apathy are really, really big in this category as well. And so The thing about this is the worse that it gets, you get neurodegeneration, right? Which basically means you're losing more and more brain cells, because that's what the microglia are doing. They are cutting off brain cells that are not performing optimally, and they're getting rid of them. So as you lose these brain cells, the end result of that is Alzheimer's disease, right? And this is why this is so important. Because when you get microglia activation and you have brain inflammation, and this brain inflammation kills these brain cells, you're speeding up the process of neuroinflammation, which is which is a mechanism of dementia, right? Parkinson's is another type of neurodegenerative disease as well. And you don't want to wait until you have a diagnosis for that kind of a thing, right? As a matter of fact, most all scientists and doctors agree that the key to making sure that you do not ever have Alzheimer's, or you do not get diagnosed with something in those categories, is prevention. And the science tells us this prevention really needs to start in our 20s and 30s. Now, if you're over 20 or 30, don't worry, it's not too late, because you just start now, right? It's like that, those proverbs that say, when's the best time to plant a tree, right? Like it was 20 years ago, but today is the next best time, right? So that's the same concept here, is that we're going to start right now, because it's not too late, but we don't want to wait until we have a diagnosis, right? In order to start protecting our brain. So you want to start protecting the brain for this process early. And if you're already experiencing, maybe chronic fatigue or brain fog, or you can't focus, and all of these symptoms that are associated with brain inflammation, you can start right now and begin to reverse this. And as a matter of fact, the earlier you start, the better. Now, another thing here is that you need to realize that once you get your brain inflammation, these are the symptoms. But what's actually happening is that the neurons in the brain are actually working at slower impulses, right? And so that slow mental endurance, that slow speed of them actually working, it's actually causing the neuron damage in the brain because of the inflammation. So we actually call this neuronal death. And this is like nerve damage and nerve death. So some other symptoms that you could get is like nerve damage, right? Like, so if you have nerve damage in your feet, or, neuropathy or anything like that, these are all connected back up to brain inflammation as well. So anytime that you start to have any loss of function, right, or you're losing volume in your brain because the neurons are starting to, degenerate, you want to go ahead and get right on top of that and stop the process as soon as you can and really get in it. And I'll tell you, brain inflammation is no joke. And the reason why I say that is, if you've ever been with somebody who's had Alzheimer's and you've watched them, slowly go through that process, it's probably one of the probably hardest things, as far as and not just it's for everybody, right? Like for the entire family, right? So it's really, really important thing to take really seriously. So what can we do about it, right? Because that's what we're here for, right? What can we do about it? How can we get better? Well, number one, maintain a healthy diet. And we want compounds like we want to include like fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, right? Because these things all keep your microglia young and shift them towards an anti-inflammatory form. So yeah, you heard me say that healthy fats were really important, right? But also keeping your blood sugar balanced, right? So this is, why we want to, have like proteins and vegetables, and then we, different things like that. So, and especially fruits, because we get lots of good stuff from fruits. Another thing is to keep your gut bacteria happy, right? Support that happy gut microbiome, because the brain and the gut are connected by the vagus nerve. So the microbes living in your gut, just like in our previous class, when we even talked about probio IQ, and we talked about the very specific selections of probiotics in that particular formula and how they specifically are also supporting the brain because of that connection. It's so powerful. So supporting that gut microbiome is really, really, really critical. And supporting and calming that vagus nerve. And you know that I'm a huge supporter of Vertizymes in this category, just like in previous classes where we've talked about Vertizymes and its ability to start at the head and not only help us in the gut, but also really calming and renewing and restoring, the vagus nerve and basically all of our neurons in there. Now, we want to supplement purposely with anti-inflammatory flavonoids, and I'll say that flavonoids are basically substances that come from fruits, vegetables, grains, roots, stems, flowers, even tea and wine. And they're basically generally speaking, they are products that can, certain flavonoids anyways, can actually cross the blood-brain barrier, and they can actually really go to work nourishing the brain. And then there's other inflammatory supplements on the market that do not cross the blood-brain barrier. So things like turmeric crosses the blood-brain barrier, right? And helps to reduce inflammation in the brain and stops the process of microglial activation. As a matter of fact, you can go and research this. If you look it up, there's tons of research on curcumin and turmeric and how it actually stops the process of microglia activation. Another thing that we hear about a lot is resveratrol. Now I'll say this is also known as grapeseed extract, and it also crosses the blood-brain barrier and helps to reduce inflammation in the brain. Now, if you were here for one of our previous classes, you might recognize both of these as found in Solflex PI. And so just like I probably said every single week, Solflex PI is something I recommend as a daily use supplement in order to reduce and fight that systemic inflammation, including inflammation in the brain, right? So it's one of those that I'm never not going to take, because I know that even if I'm not having the symptoms, my brain's processing all the time. The neurons are always doing things, and there's always a small possibility of inflammation in the brain all the time. Also, I'm constantly exposed to environmental toxins. I'm constantly exposed, to, possibly heavy metals and parasites and all the things in our environment. So I know that I want to support my brain all the time. And so there's a collection of them, but Solflex PI is definitely one of those supplements that I'm going to take all the time. And specifically for the science of it, just to pick out two little pieces of that formula, the curcumin from the turmeric and the grapeseed extract, which we sometimes isolate down to resveratrol, but we have the whole formula, or the whole parts, all the parts in our formula. Those are like two of the big key drivers for why I love Solflex PI for brain inflammation as well. Again, things like essential fatty acids, EPA, DHA, which, found in our soul megas, they can be very protective for the brain. Last week, we talked about infatuate and having those essential fats as well. So these are all things that can help to improve our brain health. And then of course, we don't want to overlook the role of, vitamin D in helping to modulate and to regulate the immune system as well. It really helps it to not become overactive and protects it from brain autoimmunity, right? So these are all different ways. And of course, we want to have things like lifestyle. You want to, make sure that we're having a calming practice, gratitude practice every single day to help recenter our body and help to reset the nervous system. These are all important lifestyle behaviors as well. So I really hope that you're starting to understand how everything fits together through all of these classes. everything is connected and why we want to look at the brain and the body connection and how addressing both the mind and the body, right, in the whole body in this certain order can really lead to relief from all of your symptoms, as well as protection from future challenges by addressing the root causes of all of your symptoms, right? Everything really improves. And that's why just in the testimonial that you heard today, it was like, well, I'm going to start and get this, hopefully get this kind of a result, but then, you know, having so many different things improve in your life. And this is what it's all about, right? And so when you follow this roadmap, your body will be able to rebalance, reset, and regenerate. And you're able to get that energy back and you know, get your old self back, maybe even your new self that you didn't know existed as well. So, and the beauty of all of this is you never have to waste time trying to figure all this out by yourself, because we have the support structures and the tools and the mentorships and the guides to help you all along the way. So I know you see right here, support neuroinflammatory pathways with a variety of medicinal mushrooms. And I'm going to get things, right, that you may already have in your program. Like I mentioned, Solmegas, Solflex PI, right? Now for tonight's Soul Connection session, I want to talk about a supplement that if you came to me and you said, I'm experiencing fatigue, brain fog, vertigo, right? And I could only recommend one thing for you to add to your program, it would be NeuroIM, because this is one, if you are looking to strengthen your overall brain health or repair and protect from damage, medicinal mushrooms are the powerhouse of brain inflammation supplements. And so tonight we have Greg Halliday, the president and founder of Soul Naturals, here to tell us more about NeuroIM and this powerful, powerful, powerful formula.
Thank you, Erica. What great information. But listening to all the teaching, if everything that you explained is like the shape of a puzzle piece, you know, it's very, all these different needs that we have and conditions that occur in the brain, it really is, NeuroIM, it fits exactly in the puzzle piece for tonight's topic. It just really does, because the mushrooms are so amazing, and also because instead of picking one or two, which would have been really easy, because I want to just share a couple of them with you. There are a couple that are really, really big right now. They're the talk of the town. And in fact, you know, like one of them, all the CBD products, you hear a lot about CBD, they all want to combine them with this first one I'm going to tell you with, because it's such a rebuilder, a brain rebuilder. And so we didn't want to stop there, because we tried to look at the broadest picture possible and complete all those little curves and bumps of the puzzle piece shape that Eric has taught us about, which is this brain health and how complex it is. And I'm sure it's just the tip of the iceberg, really, what we understand to this point. But there's so much that we do know about the brain. And I mean, starting with when I started in this industry 30 years ago, almost 32 years ago, science was adamant that the brain will not repair once damaged. You don't grow new neurons, you know, they were just adamant about it. Very different story listening to Erica today as she's gleaned things, you know, from science and her experience. So, and I'm just going to go through, try to think back to, and this is a test for all of our what they call free memory recall. So we just heard Erica. Let's see how much we can remember. And I think you're going to hear words and key terms and words that she's taught us in these summaries of studies on these 10 medicinal mushrooms. So if I look really quickly, I'm going to go through, don't have time to talk about them all tonight. So I'm going to bounce through study highlights, see if you can see terms that Erica taught us about tonight. So the first one is lion's mane. That is the #1 ingredient in NeuroIM. Lion's mane is a mushroom that looks like the mane of a lion, except for that it's white. I guess if you had an albino lion, it would look exactly like it. Why is lion's mane the flavor of the month when it comes to this industry, and it's really been the flavor of the last 2 years? Well, because it's shown to improve impairment to the brain. A lot of things involved with nerve cell reparations and communications between nerve cells. And think about, tonight I learned more about this whole microglia and the role that it plays in all of this. Lion's mane aids in that reparation process while destroying inflammatory conditions, like inflammatory plaques that get in the brain that are in evidence in an Alzheimer's situation, like oxidative stress that is always accompanying inflammation, like is seen with Parkinson and in a number of brain imbalances. Not only that, but lion's mane helps the body, better said, rebuild the protective coating around neurons or the myelin sheath. So these are all studies. Significant reduction in neuropathic pain, something that Erica mentioned. So anxiety and mental conditions associated with inflammation. All of this, the focus of studies with lion's mane. So that's the first one. Second one is meseema. Meseema, the very first study, highlights lowering inflammation in the brain and actually throughout the body, modulating immune activity and the inflammation that can come over inflammation because of certain conditions that Erica mentioned to us already, reducing allergic reactions, which often come with inflammations, decreasing and normalizing sugars in the blood, another subject that Erica, in fact, lots of diabetes study with meseema. Scar tissues in certain vital organs, including protecting heart and protecting the pancreas, protecting the gut from damage, thinking about that relation, that connection between gut and brain. Meseema, evidence all through all of that it works through the whole connective process. The next one is turkey tail. Again, helping with insulin problems and imbalances in blood sugar. One of the first 4 studies cited there. Abnormal cells that can really can develop anywhere in the body. Turkey tail, some great studies with that. I'm jumping beyond the turkey tail, although the last study she cites in turkey tail is a number of itis conditions. And anytime we see itis, that means inflammation. So liver, lungs, kidneys, all of these turkey tails brought down the inflammatory condition. Shiitake is the next one. And I think we heard a couple of times tonight from Erica about heavy metals like mercury. One of the really interesting studies of shiitake is how it will help absorb heavy metals like cadmium so that the body can rid itself from those heavy metals. Inflammation, particularly in the gut, declining. Improving the purity of blood and blood lipids. Next one is chaga. So I think, what are we at, 4 or 5 of them into there? And right out the bat with chaga, brain inflammation is cited, protecting against an Alzheimer's condition, balancing blood sugars and sugar levels, reducing damaging inflammation in both the colon and in the pancreas, and suppressing a number of pro-inflammatory mediators. So you got a lot with chaga about inflammation again. And the final one was all about fatigue. I think we heard about fatigue tonight, and how chaga, daily consumption of that mushroom, kind of an odd, kind of can be a number of different shapes, chaga on trees. Typically, I think in Brazil, very common, how it is used for fatigue. And fatigue, I agree with Erica, it is a brain condition. The next mushroom is maitake. And maitake, again, lots of studies about tumors and helping the body rid themselves. But my eye comes right to the study, that word mercury we heard from Erica. One of the great studies of maitake showed that mercury levels could be greatly reduced in blood, liver, and kidneys with just the consumption of maitake nutritionally in the diet. So it isn't too late when you have conditions where you've been exposed, you have those situations, the mushrooms can help the body do something about it. Maitake has another interesting thing back to regrowing and neurons that have been damaged. There is evidence with maitake that neurite outgrowth is stimulated. And so brain health overall improves. There's something called nerve growth factor, and that is also stimulated by maitake. And so there are lots of great studies, maitake going along with the lion's mane that I mentioned earlier. And the next mushroom, tremella, which is this beautiful white, it can be white to tan depending on where you get them. They're very common in China, but also in Japan, I believe, is where we get ours. Again, nerve growth and neurite outgrowth, protecting against things like Alzheimer's and other brain imbalances. Peripheral nerve regeneration. So thinking of, I think that was mentioned by some nerve pains and neuropathies, not just in the central nervous system in the brain itself, but as they reach throughout the body, even regenerating peripheral nerves. That's another study cited by Dr. Allison with tremella. So I think I'll stop there today because that's not all of them, but that's a bunch of them. And it gives you a flavor. If you read through enough material on all of them, all 10 of them in varying ways and with different blends of these wonderful compounds, some of which they all share in common, and others are kind of unique in some of them, which is why we included 10. It really does fill out the puzzle piece. Like Erica said, if you had to just take one thing, what we see here in Solle is people adding it to a program, and then they really start to see just another level up because they get the benefit of the rest of the balancing. Back to you, Erica.
I love it. NeuroIM is one of my favorite formulas. I can always tell when I haven't taken it. Like I normally take it in the morning about 9 o'clock, but if I get to 10 or 10:30 and I'll be like, I just like don't feel like my brain's like working quite as well as it is, or like my energy is not quite the same. And I'll be like, did I have my NeuroIM this morning? And sure enough, almost every single time that happens to me, it's a lack of NeuroIM. And so I know it's a formula that definitely works, and I can feel it. So while I have you, Greg, we have a question and I'd love to get your take on it. So if someone is allergic to mushrooms, what does that mean for NeuroIM or even like ProBioIQ, where we have, a medicinal mushroom in there as well?
As with anything, I think when someone's trying something new and you have any reason to be concerned, you can try with a very small amount, even up to like opening a capsule and putting a little on your tongue and wait 20 minutes. I know that sounds kind of reckless. It's actually the opposite. The reason that we're comfortable in saying that is because from everything that I hear, both from scientists throughout the years and this a few decades of work of dealing with mushrooms, and particularly here in Solle with Dr. Allison, there are as many varieties in mushrooms. To say I'm allergic to mushrooms is almost like to say I'm allergic to fruit. There's so many different kinds throughout the world that you just don't know. They're so different and unique. I mean, there's some you don't ever want to eat or touch for sure. The mushrooms that Solle deals with are all very, very heavily studied. And honestly, everything we deal with, we don't deal with experimental plants, things that don't have much study. But that being said, that's if someone's got a reason to fear that, they can always start with a little teeny bit. You can dump a few greens, see how you do. Okay, put a capsule in there, wait 45 minutes. And you can kind of go slow and see. That said, so the only other thing I would add is so many allergies, especially when we hear food allergies. What I am taught by so many of our Solle mentors is that when you balance the system And in particular, some of the most powerful testimonials that several of our leaders have are this exact point, this exact question. So again, even the fact that I'm allergic to X kind of I'm assuming a mushroom that's a good mushroom, nutritional, and I'm allergic to it. These are things that can be like one of those things you don't expect that just changes over time if you really are willing to get in there and balance the system. So yeah, lots of hope there. Don't stress that one. You've got some options. You can work and balance. You can go, if you're jumping right into neuro, you can just taste a little bit of it, see how you feel, and go from there. That's my take on it. But again, it's really nothing from me and everything I've gleaned from a lot of wonderful mentors over the years. Soul.
Love it. Love it. And I completely agree with the concept of food allergies kind of balancing out, especially, you know, as you heal the gut and that immune system, especially of the gut. Just like we've talked in previous classes, allergies are part of the immune system, right? Like that's actually the immune response, the histamine response. And so as you really are focusing on a balancing program and really balancing everything out, you might discover that you're not quite as allergic to all the things that you think you're allergic to. And hey, you might discover that you can eat some of the foods that you love that you haven't had in years. Like you're like, oh, I really like this thing. I haven't had it in, 20 years, but I'm no longer allergic to it. So everything can happen in the body. Our body is absolutely incredible and miraculous in healing itself. And so sometimes we just have to give it the right tools, nutritional tools and mindful tools and behavioral tools to allow it to do so. Can you take Soul Megas, NeuroIM, and Soul Flex PI together? So I'm going to say yes. I do know that some people don't necessarily like to take NeuroIM and Soul Megas together. I actually take mine together every single morning. So there's different philosophies of thought. I have been taking mine together every single morning. So if you want to know why some people recommend not to, is because NeuroIM is fibrous compound and Soul Megas is fat. And sometimes we see reduced absorption in the body. In my experience, because of these incredible formulas, though, that hasn't necessarily been a problem for me. And because I can like feel them working. So I know I'm not having a problem absorbing NeuroIM. My brain's working real good. I love it. Tanya says that her daughter, her food allergies are gone. So that's the power of being on a balancing program for a period of time. I love it. Y'all love NeuroIM, love learning about mushrooms. Well, clearly we have more mushrooms to talk about. So we'll have to bring Greg back to talk about all the rest of the mushrooms because they're all so incredible. This formula is incredible. And don't tell Greg I said so, but I'm pretty sure it's underpriced. Like it's like underpriced. Like when you compare it to other things, like don't tell him. Like it's like one of those things. I mean, you could probably make an entire business like just out of NeuroIM. I think I said that about another product too, but I'm pretty sure like we could just have a business out of NeuroIM. Again, don't tell him about the price. I appreciate all y'all's loves and kudos. I don't see any other questions. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up for tonight. I appreciate every single one of you for coming out. And don't forget, next week, we're going to be talking about the brain again, neurotransmitters specifically, and how that relates to stress and everything in our body, and how our nutrition affects our ability to create those neurotransmitters that basically create all the other things in our body. So we will be talking still more about the brain, and that next week. It's going to be a really powerful class. Super excited about that. And I want to thank every single one of you for coming out tonight. I appreciate you all, and have a wonderful night.